welcome back, and sorry for being a little bit late, but we're delighted now to be able to launch the Irish Agroforestry Forum website. And Sean, very briefly, first of all, and we'll reintroduce our guests, what is it?
Well, the Irish Agroforestry, I'm going to actually let Dr. Jim McAdam talk about it, but we've been working on this for almost just over 18 months now, and it's a coming together of interests in this whole area. And in fairness, I suppose, this was initiated primarily, I think, by a couple of organic farmers, and Eugene and Jim, back in October 2000, and actually is it 2018? 2019, sorry. So I think we should pass it over to them because they were the main drivers of
Fantastic. So we're joined now by Eugene Curran from the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Jim McAdam, Imogen Ramone, who we heard from just an hour ago, Clive Bright, farmer, and also Ian Short from Teagasc. So you're all very welcome. Eugene, just go through it a little bit. I mean, I suppose, this is the start of something in Ireland, isn't it?
I think Jim was the founding father of agroforestry, really, on the island of Ireland. So maybe Jim?
Jim.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose, agroforestry had been, the agroforestry research programme had started in the north about 30 years ago, but we had very little interest in agroforestry then, because it just really wasn't, it was considered very much out on a limb. Foresters weren't particularly interested, and we had very sporadic interest in it. But there was a sort of growing movement in the UK of diverse interests in agroforestry, and Eugene and Ian were also, and I were a part of the UK Agroforestry Forum, and we saw how the forum there acted very much as a conduit for this slowly developing interest in agroforestry. So through just attending various meetings we were at, conferences and things, we just sort of got together and thought, well, look, things are building up in Ireland. Eugene had some good initiatives, and he had got some farmers and growers who were interested in the idea of agroforestry, completely outside the other conventional routes. And he was pushing for an agroforestry scheme in the south, which eventually happened. So 4 or 5 years ago, over the last 4 or 5 years, things have slowly developed. And then about really in the last 2 years, we started to really see a big increase in interest in agroforestry. It really sort of came in with I suppose, the climate crisis facing farming and facing us all, and agroforestry was gradually being seen as one potential solution for a lot of those problems we were facing. So suddenly we were getting queries and a wide body of interest in agroforestry, and we got together then, we got the department interested, Teagasc were interested, and Eugene and Niall were interested in the department. And we had Teagasc, Tom Houlihan and Ian and others, of course. I don't want to mention any names because I'll leave people out. And really the whole beauty of the thing is we have such a diverse interest of people that are interested in agroforestry. But we all just started to get there probably just at the tail end of 2019. And we started to plan to meet and gradually get that interest in agroforestry pulled together. In fact, one of the saddest things is, through putting this whole agroforestry forum together, there's a whole stack of people on our group who we've got to know really well over meeting regularly, but I've never actually seen them because we can't meet. So someday there will be a bright new day when we'll all get together in the Landmark Hotel over a pint, and we'll be able to actually see what each other looks like. I know you see on a Zoom image, but it would just be lovely to get together. But anyway, we've gradually put together a more formal structure of an agroforestry forum. And if I could just quickly run through sort of the need as we saw it and then the aims of the forum as they've come out. The first really was to act as a coordinate voice, if you like, for agroforestry. There was this interest coming, very dispersed interest coming from all sorts of angles, from researchers who were working actively on agroforestry, but actual growers and innovative farmers out there who were very interested in and knew about the benefits of agroforestry. So one of our first aims really is to act as a coordinated voice. The second is really to educate people. We just took it to forum, and we get queries from the press, we get queries regularly just about what is agroforestry, and it's just that educational role, and to get that even ideally into agriculture courses through colleges and so on. Then thirdly, really, a key role was to disseminate the results of research, because a lot of people who were contacted were saying, does anybody know anything about the nutritional value of tree fodder? Does anybody know anything about effect of fungi on trees and stuff? And there's a lot of research that has been done on these things, but for most people, they're not aware of it, or they weren't aware of where they could source or find that. So really we saw research, coordinating research, making the results of relevant research to this island, the island of Ireland. And I would stress too, we are an all-island organisation. We are trying to encourage people from the north and the south together to develop agroforestry. But our idea was to coordinate all that research together, and Ian Short has been doing that, so that whenever we're at website, which we're just about to launch, which Sean will tell you about, that will give people who are interested access to the most up-to-date research. And in relation to that, we are also, because Eugene and Ian and I represent Ireland on the European Agroforestry Federation, that is a tremendous organisation for giving us access to a huge body of experience and practical experience across all of Europe. And being for a very small input, we are actually now when we form our Irish Agroforestry Forum, we will officially be members of the European Agroforestry Federation, and that will give us a huge amount of access to knowledge and information. Then the next aim we had was really training provision. We saw, as you've seen out there, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people really keen to know how can agroforestry fit into their farm, what benefit can they get from agroforestry. A lot of foresters are interested, how can we grow better trees, better form of trees, to get a more valuable crop. So there's really a need for training, and once the forum gets up and going, and thanks to the support we've had from NOTS and various groups, we really hope to get into the whole business of actually training people in the diversity that agroforestry can offer us. Then really a key role is really to advise policy. I think we've seen, looking at Gavin's talk, one of the highlights really of the whole conference has been seeing that clip of Sean and Gavin talking in his field, and it just made you realise, number one, what a great proponent he is for agroforestry, but number two, how just there's no support mechanism at all for him. He falls foul of every mechanism for support. So we really, and we know there are policy people on our group forming the forum who are very keen to explore ways in which they can come up with support packages for agroforestry. And our overall pact is that there should be really, agroforestry should be supported both as a forestry measure and an agriculture measure. Interestingly, in the north of Ireland, it's an agri-environment, in an agri-environment scheme. In the south, it's in a forestry measure. Neither of which are perfect, but at least they are starting the ball rolling in interest. And I think the challenge is to get schemes designed which allow people to come into agroforestry from both the forestry route as a way of growing quality trees and integrating with farming, and as the agriculture route as a way of creating sustainable grassland by putting trees onto that. And that way, because, at the end of the day, we really have to interest farmers. We really have to interest intensive stock and tillage farmers into trying to put more trees into their farms and agroforestry system. And we want to have the right support measures there, because this is a new and unknown area for our policy colleagues. So that the more support we can give them through advice, that's one of our key challenges. And then finally, really our aim is just simply to promote agroforestry, and just comes round to this conference, terrific initiative. Here we have, agroforestry, several hundred people clicking in with an interest in agroforestry. It's promoting agroforestry. It's sort of snowball is building up. The wheels are turning. It'll be hard to stop them now. And I think it's just getting that knowledge out there. But we really want to be if you like, just a close family almost of people who are willing to help anybody who wants to plant agroforestry. And those of us that have some interest and expertise in it are there, and we're going to be available to help those of you who are interested in taking agroforestry further.
Well, thank you, Jim. And obviously it goes without saying that none of this would have happened without you. So it's just marvellous. Ian, I just wanted to go to you in Teagasc. I mean, what's been very interesting in the last 2 days is not only the discussion about trees, but also the different, ways in which, dairying and livestock and vegetables and tillage, it's all been discussed. How do you think this kind of initiative, this forum, can interest the wide variety of farming that goes on in Ireland?
Well, I think the last couple of days has shown just how much interest there is in agroforestry and its building. But the benefits of trees to all these different agricultural enterprises is quite apparent, and the forum will be able to provide information and support to people that are looking for that information from all areas of agriculture. And
the document, Eugene, that's been produced by you, by all of you, the new agroforestry support programme in Ireland, these proposals that people can read, can't they, Sean?
Yes.
It's online, it'll be sent to everyone.
They've literally got it this minute.
They've just got it this minute. Eugene, just talk a little bit about the policy side of things. I mean, where ideally should this go in terms of the recommendations that are here?
Well, I think Jim pretty much hit the nail on the head. One of the things I've discovered is that there isn't a simple answer to this, that it actually encapsulates agriculture and forestry, and there is a place for agroforestry in both. I think what the forestry side would involve closer trees at closer spacing, whereas the wider space trees, or maybe the wider alleys, that those would probably sit better, or parkland planting might sit better in an agricultural side of things. When we set up the scheme initially in the department, we had this vision of what was in Loughgall, and we knew it worked, and we headed with that. But because of it, I met people like Clive and Sean and Imogen and others who are constantly coming up with interesting ideas and new approaches. And even my neighbours across the way, and I'm looking out at their field, they have driven cattle grazing amongst hazel trees. So there are people out there who are practicing agroforestry. They have good ideas, interesting ideas. They mightn't all be encapsulated under forestry. It won't be all encapsulated under agriculture, but certainly if we can get some of the important elements into both, we'll increase the amount of tree planting on farms. I think that's the common goal, is to get just more trees in farms.
I mean, what seems obvious in the last 2 days from the discussions is it doesn't sit naturally just within a forestry scheme, that it is so much more than that. And really, I mean, we've heard obviously Northern Ireland's under agri-environment, but it is more towards agriculture. But then also this interesting element of, for example, flood mitigation, where actually suddenly you're not just talking about one department, but you are talking about other departments within government that could benefit from these kind of things, and from the use of public money to support landowners and farmers to do this.
I mean, the environmental benefits are just overwhelming. I mean, when you look at what some of the speakers have said, John Duffy and Andy Dibben and Imogen and Clive and others, it's overwhelming. It's a sort of a no-brainer that the environmental benefits are there, and riparian protection of water, of course, is just one of them, but it's a very, very important one. And in the introduction by the minister, she pointed out that there's going to be some sort of measure put in place where there will be some riparian planting scheme put in place. So it's all for the good. It's all moving in the right direction. Agroforestry is here to stay. There's no question about that. And it's just a matter of how much we can push the boat out and how we can create options for landowners to visit their farms.
And Clive, what was interesting, I think, obviously yourself and John gave a very strong presentation to farmers who've really, looked at this very seriously and really, gone in terms of a whole farm approach. But I just wonder for the farmers who are watching, who haven't done any of this, or who want to dip their toe into it, this kind of agroforestry forum, I suppose, is just an obvious way that they can find out more and connect with farmers like yourself to get more advice.
Yeah, I think it's going to be brilliant, and it's like the conference. I think really sums up the diversity of agroforestry as a topic, first of all, but then the diversity of people who've come together to form the forum, like and we've all worked really well together, and we all have our own. Nobody came with an agenda beyond wanting to plant more trees on the land, like Eugene said, and but like Eugene was, for example, coming at it very much from the forestry timber end, and I'm coming at it very much from the environmental and livestock end. But none of us disagreed ever, I don't think. We just kept adding layers onto what it was all about. So it's really exciting, the wealth of knowledge within all the farmers who are experimenting around the country and within the group that the Agroforestry Forum will become is really exciting.
And Imogen, it's always very interesting to get a broader perspective outside of just of Ireland. Even though your Trees for Life has been so brilliant for people within Ireland, you also have that broader perspective in terms of some of the comments you made earlier about the fact that I suppose, perhaps we aren't, doing best by the trees that we have, let alone planting enough. And I suppose this kind of initiative can help kind of stimulate and encourage farmers to think about these things in a different way.
Yeah, I think I said it when I was talking earlier. There's 1,000 ways perhaps to plant a tree and 1,000 ways to manage it, and there are so many points of view, and we must mind what we already have. It's worth having an ear on the past. It's worth having an eye on the future. Sharing all of this information is really, you get there's often a sense, certainly, and when we're live, meeting in person, the Farm Woodland Forum in the UK, there's often a sense that everyone knows something, but no one knows everything, and there's almost, people are almost quite tentative to push forward with what they do know. But that sort of humility is great because it just sparks constant discussion, constant research, constant learning. Everyone's learning on the job. And I think we have to keep learning and learning and learning and soaking up as much as we can and observing and trying and failing. And yeah, muddling on until we really get things crystal clear. And it's never going to be clear. It's such a diverse system, agroforestry. It's 1,000 systems. We're never going to have one prescription that fits everything. How on earth that can ever be put into policy?
That's the
We've
hard
been having
bit.
a lot of fun with that.
I mean, Jim, I suppose not to labour the point, it's such an obvious one, but what has definitely come out of the last 2 days is there is an urgency to all of this with climate change, biodiversity crisis. Time is not necessarily on our side.
No, Ellie, you're very right indeed. And really, it's just to follow on what Imogen was saying there, I think we try to, agroforestry is not something you can just shoehorn into a box, into one system. It's a huge spectrum of ways. A hedge, a tree in a field, all those things where farming is interacting with trees, or livestock or crops are interacting with trees, is a variant of agroforestry. So probably we're wrong or we have to put some word on it, but we have to see it as a spectrum of events. And the fact that it is now so relevant or is so much an option we can offer farmers is really because of the Climate Act and the pressure we're on. And if we're looking for government money to help support these schemes, it should be recognised within government that agroforestry is delivering public goods. It's delivering carbon storage, which is a national need. It's delivering clean water. It's delivering biodiversity. All of these, and reducing fire risk in forests and in farmland. All of these things are public goods. They're not just, they should not just come solely out of the cost of the agriculture pot or the forestry pot. They should really be considered as part of a much wider climate challenge. And it's urgent, like you say, sooner we plant trees. I think the motto, I always take the motto of the Royal Scottish Forestry Society. I think it says, you may be planting a tree, it will be a growing when you're asleeping. So the sooner we get trees in.
Isn't that the truth? And Sean, you want people to go to agroforestry.ie now and give you their email address and start getting the networks together.
The whole design around the Irish Agroforestry Forum was that it was a non-profit organisation to support agroforestry, but as part of the main driver of that was going to be the membership. So we had hoped we'd have a website fully function. We don't have that yet, but we have a landing page where you can go in and register your interest to become a member, and this is something that we will build around as well in the future. And the other thing is, as well as for farmers out there, you know, I suppose farmers are at the centre of this. Farmers are, and this is what maybe for me is the big difference. It puts farmers staying on the land, planting trees alongside normal farming activities. And I think that's maybe a crucial thing that farmers get to do is, you know, it's a very different idea, but it's very similar at the same time. And the other thing I wanted to say as well...
So it's almost like rewilding with people?
Yes, and management, yes. So the other thing I wanted to say is, unfortunately, we lost William earlier on, but we have a video of William's, and it's a really interesting video to watch, and you'll get to ask questions by next Tuesday, because you'll have all the videos up, and William's is. But he's gone at it almost in a different way. He used normal forestry-type plantations to start his process, because he's in a very windswept area, and he's used those maximising agriculture and forestry plantations to give him what he needed so he can now further develop on. So it's almost a slightly different approach, but it's really interesting to see. So you'll get that video, it'll be sent out after this.
And I presume, Ian, I mean, all these things help also in getting research money allocated and getting a sort of body of research up and going as well.
Well, with the increasing interest in agroforestry, and particularly from the policy side, the departments are more interested and they have more awareness of agroforestry now, and they have the awareness that there is research required. So in this last call from DAFM that was announced just before Christmas, agroforestry was front and centre in that call. There was a fair bit of agroforestry that could fit into that research call. So yeah, I mean, the more that there's the demand for knowledge, the more demand there is for research. And the more demand there is for research, obviously the more demand for funding there is. So yeah, it's a very positive thing, I think. And I think the forum will be a very positive thing for us as well. Not just from the research side, but the more people that get involved in the Irish Agroforestry Forum, the larger the pot of knowledge becomes. Because we mustn't forget that whilst formal research is important, the kind of informal research that farmers and landowners do themselves is also very important as well. And whilst it may be more kind of anecdotal and not scientifically designed, that's not to say that it's not important. It truly is.
All right, well, it's live now.
IrishAgroforestry.ie, and Kevin is going to email everybody the link again.
Sean, that's the end of this conference.
It is, yeah. It's flew through, hasn't it?
So the IrishAgroforestry.ie, that's the key thing for people to go to who are interested in more. Give the email address in and then be connected into that network.
Yeah, and as soon as we get fully set up, we'll make contact with them and they'll be getting information or whatever. So we haven't worked out membership fees or anything yet, but I think it's not going to be more than 20, 30 euro for the year.
Fantastic. Now, your biggest takeaway from the last 2 days, I mean, this is the first Irish agroforestry conference that's ever happened in Ireland. So it's very interesting to hear the variety of voices that have been there, the number of farmers, the kind of questions that have come in are kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm in this position that we've worked quite closely with a lot of the speakers over the last year and a half. I think what's really interesting is probably more so from the audience and what the questions are coming back. And I see there somebody, Imogen has been a huge hit. People want her to deliver a coppicing course. You know what I mean? So there seems to be that kind of hunger for that. And maybe there's a simple and there's a little bit more complex area. Like, it's quite interesting, almost the full-scale system that Neil's talked about or Clive and John talked about. And maybe a lot of us haven't delved in as deep as those lads have on what's potential. Like John's talk today on how degraded maybe the west of Ireland is, particularly maybe the uplands areas, due to the lack of trees and how trees could change that was actually shocking for me. I think, maybe it's because I'm from the west and it's something I probably haven't considered, but I was thinking that, our mountain at home, there's only one tree I know on it, and it's in a crevice, and it's a little mountain ash. It's probably 500 years old, but it's just the sheep can only get to a certain part of it, and they can eat it. And it's only probably 8 or 10 foot tall. It's not even 8 or 10 foot tall. It's only 4 foot tall, but the sheep keeps it down, and it also hints at the idea that even at that altitude, trees one time did grow if it was managed in a proper way.
There's clearly a lot of thirst and hunger for more information and inspiration at this early stage for people. I mean, obviously there's always going to be the Clive Brights of the world who are, years ahead, and the same with, with Gavin and all the rest. But I wonder, this forum, this gathering together of the network will provide, I suppose, some of that information, won't it?
Absolutely, and I hope as well, that it allows people to think about if they have their own farm, and it doesn't matter if they're intensive or not intensive, that they could look at the farm like Imogen talks about, or a gem, and there's areas that probably they're not utilising as well as everything else, so that could become the start of their agroforestry project. But also the other end is if this would help towards, and this is what the Irish Agroforestry Farm I think will do, is influence how policy that will allow farmers to engage, because one of the great difficulties we have with the current agroforestry programme is that the rules around it, the eligibility criteria, is too stringent or isn't going to work for a lot of farmers who, as part of the direct payments and because of the public goods that farmers provide, the current system would probably push you away from that because, again, it's tied to the forestry sector. So I think, we're in this wonderful period of time that is a huge opportunity to allow flexibility in these systems.
And I thought finally that something that Imogen said was interesting, in that we can get sort of sucked into this idea of constantly planting new trees, but actually looking at your land, looking at the trees that are there, certainly not taking them down and thinking about them in a different way is a huge part of what this is about. Absolutely,
absolutely. And we are one of the lucky countries in Europe to still have a decent hedgerow system. Now, I hear it's dropping off, but I would have thought that it's been also maintained by GLAS programmes and hedgerow growth. But we are probably losing our more mature hedgerows.
I know this 2-day conference doesn't happen overnight, so you want to thank a few people behind the scenes, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. I think the first person who has to be thanked is my colleague Kevin, our communications officer, who's done so much of this hard work, and sometimes Kevin will do that, Kevin will do that. That has been happening all the time. So a big thanks to Kevin. He's worked tirelessly on this. And then for our cameraman and our sound studio who set up the whole sound studio, Mark is in the background there working away, grumpy as ever. And speaking of grumps, we have our sound man here, Martin, in the background as well, who've done loads of good work, in fairness to them. And then downstairs, we have had Siobhan and Kieran, who has taken all the bookings or dealing with any queries. And all this takes time, and I suppose a big thanks to Skillnet Ireland who've helped fund this, and also to our board, who's given us the discretion to go and do things like that.
And also all the participants who over the
Yes.
last few days have dialed in
Yes.
on Zoom. I mean, these
And the
things
speakers,
are
you know.
disappointing not to meet them in person, but actually it enables a lot.
Yes, and hopefully the next Agroforestry conference, as Jim alluded to, will be where we can all meet up and chat. And a big thanks to the speakers. You know, a lot of people do this for all the right reasons. So, you know, it's been really, really great. And I thought, you know, there's one other girl from the Soil Association who has offered the services of Ben Raskin to come and do that, you know. And they're so busy. It was just brilliant because they see the benefit of agroforestry, you know what I mean? And
There's a lot of goodwill out there.
Yes, there is,
Yes.
absolutely.
Fantastic. And all of these videos will be up, of course, for people who've
Kevin
got the
assures me
password.
they'll be up
In the
by
next few
tomorrow
days.
evening.
Fantastic. And follow hashtag agroforestry
Forestry.
online as well.
And just to remind people, this in many ways is not the end of this. We have a 2-hour, we've added in this additional Q&As for times to go back, look at the videos. People that maybe didn't get to see them all in their schedules, they can re-look at them. But also William Considine's one there. And we're going to have, hopefully all the speakers, we're going to have next Tuesday. Ella, you're back in the hot seat again.
Pleasure.
And so you'll get time to answer those questions. So it's
That's April
Tuesday
the 20th.
Yes, 7 to 9.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, all of you out there who've participated and got in touch with us and emailed and sent your comments and sent your questions. It's really been a superb 2-day event, and we hope that you will join us next Tuesday at 7.